Welcome to Thanks for Visiting, a podcast that's part conversation, part time capsule. I'm your podcast host, Lex. In these minutes and moments, I'm sitting down with people I deeply respect and admire to explore life, the human experience, and the creative spirit. Together, we're creating our visitor records, snapshots of our existence and contributions while we're visiting here on planet Earth. Let's help each other navigate this wild human adventure called life.
Once you make the decision to write or do any project, whatever type of art it is, anybody can have an idea, anybody can have, talent, but I really think that, 50 to 60 to 70% is actually forcing yourself to exercise those brain muscles.
On this episode of Thanks for Visiting, Katie and I are with writer Mike Smith from Pittsburgh, PA. Mike is also a dear friend of ours. So, Mike, thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you both for having me. I'm so excited to be on this podcast. It's one of my favorite podcasts to listen to, so I'm honored to be one of your guests.
How many podcasts have you actually listened to based on that statistic you've given us?
Hundreds.
Great.
We'll take
We're killing it, Katie.
Yeah. We are.
Mike, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So, I think your intro was perfect, but, I'm just a writer in Pittsburgh. I've written a couple of books. I've also, focused on writing and directing short films, as well as doing some freelance comedy writing on the side. So try to be the jack of all trades when it comes to, writing and just keeping my plate full with, a lot of fun things. But my latest project, which was just recently released that I'm excited for, is a new fiction novel called Turning Corners.
It is so exciting for me to talk about this with you today.
We have so many copies of Turning Corners in the room we're in right now. We counted the copies of Turning Corners in this room right now, and it's 7. And also, this is the 7th episode of the podcast. So that means
That's
something,
karma,
right?
Yeah.
They say it is the number of perfection.
Ooh.
I'll take it. I will take it.
And can I have one of you guys explain how the three of us know each other? Because I always forget.
I guess I will tell this story because I recall it quite well. So I met Katie first, and I think it was 2012. And I had written and produced a short film called Lemon Drops, which Katie auditioned for and got one of the roles. It was a 4-character and took place in one room, and we shot it in a building in downtown Pittsburgh. And so that's how I met Katie. And then during the editing process, we discovered that we had a lot of sound issues during post-production. And so I reached out to Katie and said, do you know anybody who is really good with audio editing? And so she introduced me to you, Lex. Then you were living in Portland, I think, at the time. You weren't in Pittsburgh at that point. So we didn't actually meet in person, but that's how we met. And then we also found out the weird coincidental connection that your mom and my wife were together with each other.
Yes.
Which I think was just a pure coincidence. And we found that out while discussing one of our projects. So I met Katie first, then you through Katie. But I think it was several years before we actually met in person. But by the time we actually met physically in person, we had worked on a number of different projects together at that point. So
totally.
Fast friends for years, but both of you guys I met at different points because of that one short film.
Love it.
And your wife and I might be related.
Yo, yeah, well, that's right.
Yeah, your wife went to my grandfather's funeral, I think.
Something like that.
Or
Are you kidding me?
Italians in Pittsburgh. I think that's what it comes down to. All the Italians in Pittsburgh are related.
Pizzelles.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm also Italian. I want to get in on this. Just so you know, I'm also Italian.
Yeah.
Yes. I just think it's crazy.
Well, Katie and I also found out we have like 6,000 weird connections to each other. Like, I think like every year we find out a new one that we have.
Wait a minute. That's right. Can you name them? You have better
So
memory.
I want to say, is it your husband's mom who was a college roommate with a friend of mine's mom? We found that one out.
Yes.
A friend that graduated with my wife babysat for your brother's kids or something like that.
Yes.
It's like every 2 years, it's like we just have another weird connection.
Also, my brother and you lived at some point in the same town.
Yeah.
Where you currently live is where he used to live.
It's Pittsburgh. I'm telling you, it's a Pittsburgh thing.
Yeah.
Well, you know what it also makes me think about?
What's that?
It makes me think about turning corners. And I have this story about these people who you say on the back, as these characters' stories unfold, their intersections prove to be more than just coincidence.
That's right.
I have chills. Dang it.
Would you classify this as a murder mystery?
You could classify it as a murder mystery. I'm happy to give like the 1,000-foot view synopsis. And you guys,
Yeah.
when people ask me what is Turning Corners about, I say it's a fiction novel. I like to say it's a drama with sprinkles of mystery spread throughout. So you can kind of put it in both of those different genres. It's a non-linear story told from the point of view of multiple characters. And it's essentially about a couple who is celebrating the launch of the wife's very newly launched nonprofit, which is seeing a lot of potential success. Interrelated, very close by, there's a woman who is found deceased at the bottom of her apartment building. And it's about the potential connection between all of these different characters, including the detective who is investigating the mysterious death of this woman. So it's kind of, I would say, in the realm of, Gone Girl / Girl on a Train-esque in terms of similar type stories. Hopefully, the mystery elements keep you guessing. That's obviously what the hope is. But I'd say it's drama with hints of mystery, not purely like a Sherlock Holmes type mystery book. So it's not like Agatha Christie or anything like that. It's drama infused with mystery elements, I think.
That was such a great synopsis. Good job, Mike.
Thank you.
I was so impressed. I mean, I know you're my friend. I have the coolest friends. Like, I just know all these cool, interesting, kind people that I want to cheerlead and hype up all the time. And you make it easy. Katie, you make it so easy. Like, it's just easy to hype you guys up. I have composed some of your films, which were stellar. I know that you've done comedy writing as well, which I would like to get into. But it's a different level to write a book. And you've written other books. Do you want to talk on that part really quick, how you have other books out?
Sure. I wrote a couple, quote unquote books when I was like in high school and in college. They were, they're things that like I wouldn't ever let people read because they're not good. The first book that I put out there was a novel called Miss Mezzanine. It was a coming of age drama. Technically a novel, it's a short novel, and that was over a decade ago that I wrote that one. So I'd always wanted to write another one, but it was just a matter of when I was going to find an idea or a storyline that I thought was worth investing a lot of time into. And so I say that this is my second novel. I think a lot of us work on a lot of things when we're younger, and we don't really, I'd say, count that anymore. But I'd say this is my second book. So Miss Mezzanine was my baby, and this is what I would say is my follow-up to that. A little bit more mature, I think, just because, Miss Mezzanine, the character, is a 21-year-old kid on the verge of college graduation, and the characters in this book are, in their late 30s like myself, and they have a little bit more life experience like I do. So it's a book that I wouldn't have been able to write in my 20s. So
Well said. I understand that. We're going to dive into some thoughts on the book, but I definitely want to reroute to this idea how, as we mature, how that affects our art. But yeah, reading this, I was so impressed. And I have to say, one of my majors was forensics. So as a forensics nerd reading this, it was a page turner. I've been looking for a book that I get absorbed into, that takes me out of the day-to-day. I love to read, but I don't do it as often as I would like. And when I do read, I tend to read nonfiction because it's hard for me to find fiction stuff that really kind of takes me in. So kudos on that. I am that person that if I start a book, it's not like grabbing me. I'm like, I've got too many other things that I would like to do, and I will stop reading a book. So I finished it. It drew me in. I don't want to give anything away. To me, it is a must read, and it was very compelling, and I'm very impressed. And I was like, this is my friend. My friend wrote this. And the whole time I was reading it, I was going, how do people do this? Where do you start? How do you write a book? And I don't know if you want to give us any insight of like, I'm like, you wrote a book. How do people accomplish this?
Yeah, I'm happy to go into my process because I'm sure every writer or author has a different way of how their works come about. In this case, in Turning Corners, my wife and I were driving to Chicago for a friend's wedding a couple years ago. And it was a long drive, and my wife was in the passenger seat. I was driving most of the way, and she was sleeping and just taking a nap in the front seat. And I was just sitting there by myself driving down, the Ohio Turnpike in Indiana. Just for those that don't know, it's just a straight road. It's very boring. There's not a lot of scenery. I was just thinking of ideas of like, what could a cool idea be? And I got the idea of a big party that's hosted by a couple, and the couple's hiding something. I didn't know what they were hiding, but I just had this idea that there's a big kind of gala, and the hosts there's something they're not telling. And then I had another idea of a girl who is found dead at the bottom of a balcony. And I just started, it's kind of like making soup or, making a dish. It's like, okay, you have these two random events. How can I start to turn this into a plot? How can I turn this into a story? And I just had hours where I was just kind of driving by myself, and I was just picking pieces, and I was like, okay, well, maybe this guy can be doing this, or maybe he, has problems behind the scenes related to, this, or, oh, maybe that girl who they found dead could be investigated by this detective, and maybe he has problems with this. And I just kind of kept adding bits and pieces. And by the end of the trip, I kind of had a rough skeleton of a plot. Obviously, a very rough skeleton of a plot, but I felt like it was a story that I could craft into a full-length novel. And so when it comes to writing a book, and again, everybody's kind of different, I'm sure, but once you feel like there is an idea or a world you can create of characters in a story, it's just a matter of, okay, I need to just put some words down on a paper. And so I think within a few weeks after that initial car ride, I had put together a kind of a full outline, soup to nuts. Here's how this is going to start. And then from that point, this is where I would bring in my editor, who I've worked with on Miss Mezzanine and a bunch of other projects. And I sent her an outline. Her name is Allison. She's a brilliant editor, and without her expertise, these words wouldn't be where they are today. And I said, okay, here's my shell of a story. What are the things I should start thinking about because I'm going to start to write this book? And that's kind of how it starts, is it just kind of stems from an idea, and you add a little bit more ingredients each day, and eventually you just get to a point where you're like, okay, it needs to come out of my head and onto the page. So I don't know how other authors kind of do it. Some people might start writing first. Some people might need every chapter outlined before they can do anything. But in my case, I had so much time to get into these characters' heads while I was just driving that I don't know if it would have came out the same way if it was different, because, how often do we just have hours and hours of silence? So it was kind of an interesting one, but I'm grateful for the fact that I had that time to just flesh things out a little bit, because it just made me more excited.
Where in the process of writing it did you determine the title?
The title came later. It's not really a spoiler, but the title in this case, Turning Corners, is the name of the nonprofit that the wife is launching. It was in the process of writing the first draft, but I didn't know what the name of the nonprofit was going to be. So once I realized that the nonprofit was going to be called Turning Corners, that's when I said, oh, this would make for a catchy title as well, because you can say that it has multiple meanings, and it kind of just worked out. But the title came after I actually figured out what this nonprofit was going to be called, and it just kind of worked out that the nonprofit title I thought made for a good book title too. But it wasn't early. It was into the writing process.
That's a good question.
I've got two more, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
When you were a child, were you really imaginative and dreaming up stories all the time?
Yeah, and that's probably very cliched of, the writer who always knew they wanted to be a writer. But yeah, when I was a kid, I loved writing. I wrote little stories when I was, third, fourth, fifth grade, and I wish I still had them just to look back on. But not only I think just thinking of stuff, but being able to actually write a 3-page story when you're a kid. I mean, there's a discipline element to it. So I did have a lot of ideas and imagination and all that stuff, but I think what made it fun was that I actually enjoyed, sitting in my room and actually taking a pen out and writing something.
Can you speak more about the discipline of it? I want to know what that means for you.
Yeah, so I think every artist has, whether it's a book or it's a music album or an acting project, whatever it is, I mean, you have to hone your craft. And a lot of it is just there's hundreds of distractions that are pulling you away from doing that on any given day. And so it's a matter of actually saying, okay, I'm going to not just watch TV tonight. I'm going to go and actually force myself to write 500 words. Or it's like exercise, I mean, how much of us wish we could exercise more, and we just say we don't have the time, we don't have the time. We do have the time. We have the time to do a lot of things we don't realize. But with writing, it's a little challenging because, sometimes you'll say, oh, I just don't know what to do. I have writer's block or whatever the case may be. But I mean, forcing yourself to put words out, forcing yourself to, edit a page or something like that. Once you make the decision to write or do any project, whatever type of art it is, anybody can have an idea, anybody can have, talent, but I really think that, 50 to 60 to 70% is actually forcing yourself to exercise those brain muscles.
I'm so sorry. I have to ask one more question because that really fits with something else I wanted to talk on. I have this theory. There's some writers that are technically good at writing, like maybe they're copywriters, copy editors. There's writers that have something to say or a story to tell. Are you both?
Oh, that's a great question. I probably would put myself in the latter category. I've gotten better at the first part, and that's mainly from, experience in doing these, doing so many of those. You just obviously get better over time. And then working with an editor, you get to see the output of the reverse. You get to see somebody in real time showing you how to get better with the mechanicals, with the technicals. And so I think that makes you a little bit better, but I would say the heart, I'm probably in the person who I have a cool idea and I just want to get it out there. Or I have an idea I think is cool and I want to get it out there.
Would you say that if somebody is out there and they have something to say and they want to be a writer, but they're scared to either try it or call themselves a writer, is this first one being technically good at the writing a requirement?
Well, you can't be good at writing technically if you don't write. So the way that I would say is that if you want to be a writer, but you don't think you can, or you don't feel like you've earned the word or whatever reservations you have, that's true unless you actually start writing. So it's like anything. It's like, learning a new sport or something like that. If you're a kid who wants to take up playing baseball on a league, you're not going to come, hitting triples on your first swing. You go by practicing, you go by playing games, you go by playing more games, you go by watching other professionals do it, you do it by listening to your coach, whatever it is, you learn by doing. So I would say, to your question, Katie, no, you don't have to be a good writer to write. You just have to write in order to write, and over time, you'll just get better as you go.
I love that.
That was like a truth bomb. I love that so much. Your answer to that, I think, is going to just open some doors for people wide open that before were too afraid to even think about it. So thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I really like this idea of discipline because I think it's what makes someone truly an artist that is releasing their stuff into the world. I give anyone credit for finishing a book, a painting, a song, anything, because it is that discipline that sees you through it. How do you deal with the things that want to interrupt your discipline? Is that an inner critic for you too? Is that just life? You're also a dad, you're a husband.
Yeah, I mean, time is obviously one of those things that will work against you in terms of, do I have time to write? I should be doing X. I should be doing Y. I should be doing Z. So that's like the inner critic stuff. But I'd say, one of the benefits to writing a book and maybe this is different for other types of art, but I have a real person who's telling me all the things that are wrong with it that I need to fix. And that's what the editing process is about. So the good news is that I can kind of ignore the inner critic in me because I know that it's going to come out in the editing process. And I mean that as a huge compliment, because sometimes it's like, I don't know if this is working, but maybe it's in my head, or I don't know if this character is coming off as authentic, but maybe I'm just being crazy, or this character is never going to work, or whatever it is. You'll find that out when you're editing, because either you have an editor who's pointing something out that's similar, or you have somebody who's beta reading your book, maybe an early draft, and they're saying, I don't know, this doesn't feel right. So, the inner critic part, I'd say it's easier, at least in my case, to brush aside, because I know I'm going to get the real-time, real-life criticism or feedback or whatever it is that's saying you need to work on this or you need to fix this. If there's something that it's like, this is the worst piece of garbage ever, hopefully I didn't make it that far without somebody telling me that first, and I wouldn't have put it out into the world. But so that's the benefit, is you get that real external feedback as you go.
When you're speaking about your writing discipline, is an element of that where you are saying, just keep writing. So what does that look like for you? Are you saying just keep writing once you have these ideas? Or you said the previous book, Miss Mezzanine, was 10 years ago. How did you keep up a writing practice in that interim period?
I wrote 3 short stories, novelettes, whatever you want to call them, that were exclusively on Kindle. So they weren't enough to be printed. But I had those in between these 2. They're called Cake Batter, The Lavender Run, and The Shortcut. So those were 3 shorter ones that I wrote that, when you get that itch, sometimes oh, here's another idea. And those were easier to write just because they weren't as long. So that helps. But in terms of writing the big one, for anybody that's listening to this and wants to write a novel, it's a beast in terms of time. But I found it breaking things into chunks and specific finish lines and milestones is one of the ways that can kind of keep you going. So if it was a random Saturday, I'm not trying to write the book. I'm trying to write 1,000 words so that I'm 10% closer to the end of the second draft or whatever. So
cool.
I know it's just cheating mental things, but it kind of helps just to know that there are so many steps in the novel writing process that if you look at a piece of paper or if you open a blank Microsoft Word document, it's like, how do I even start? And it's just you force yourself to make the chunks and different milestones, and that kind of helps. Writing specific projects, maybe smaller ones like I had done, if somebody has an idea and they just want to keep their brain fresh, that helps. But I'd say beyond that, just creating specific milestones and goals for yourself so that, yes, what the end goal is. The end goal is to be done with the book, but you might have 100 smaller steps to get there. And so, a good writing session could be one of your steps or halfway through a big step or something like that. So I found that that's helped. And this is kind of an aside, but, I have a friend who's hopefully going to be listening to this podcast who's working on her own novel. She's working on her first draft. And I keep saying, when you finish that first draft, you might be 20% through the project. But when you finish the first draft, you wrote a book. And you can say that forever. Doesn't matter if nobody sees it. Doesn't matter if it sits on your computer and doesn't come out into the world. If you write a first draft, you wrote a book. And you have that claim for the rest of your life. And so, making those types of milestones, I just think adds a lot of encouragement and helps keep the discipline.
I have a couple rapid fire questions for you.
Rapid fire.
Okay. Do you have any quirks for when you're writing and you don't know not sure what to write next? Do you jump up and down or stand on your head or stretch or do anything weird?
That's a great question. And I have an actual answer for it. It's taking a shower.
Even if you don't need one?
Even if you don't need one. Clears the brain.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. Amazing. Okay. Next one. Do you have any fidgets?
I don't. I should. Actually, no. I take that back. I have a Rubik's Cube. And sometimes I have that next to me, and I will sometimes play with the Rubik's Cube. Not necessarily when I'm writing, but it's if I'm just trying to distract myself and keep my hands busy.
Have you figured out if you have an inner monologue?
I'm so bad. I don't know. I've gone back and forth on this inner monologue question. And
I'll give some context. This idea that not everyone has an inner monologue, which I have assumed this whole time because I do have an inner monologue. And then Katie and I talked about it, and it can be a blend. We read that it could be a spectrum where some people think more visually To me, as a writer, I would assume that a writer has an inner monologue, but I'm curious, maybe you see it in visuals. Okay, for an example, when you're driving in the car on this trip, wife in the seat, sleeping, and you're thinking through these things, is there an inner voice that is saying, the detective, maybe he has this backstory of XYZ, and then you're like, yeah, and then he says this. It's like a very much a conversation in your head. You're not hearing a voice. It is just like your thoughts in your head. Or are you seeing it in a visual?
I guess I have an inner monologue then, to use that great analogy, because when I'm thinking of ideas for the book, and again, I know we're tying it back to writing, but that's a great analogy. I'm thinking of the actual words that are going into the book. So I guess I do. I guess I have an inner monologue.
Yeah.
ChatGPT is going to help us determine if we have one. Here are some signs that you do have one. One, you hear your own voice in your head, maybe, like narrating thoughts, decisions, or reactions. Two, you talk to yourself through tasks like, okay, first I'll make coffee, then I'll answer emails. Three, you replay conversations or mentally rehearse what you'll say in the future. Four, you reflect in words, not just abstract ideas or images. And five, you debate with yourself, weighing pros and cons like an internal conversation.
I have an inner monologue then. I guess I meet all that
Me
criteria.
too.
We figured it out today. We figured it out.
Oh, wait a minute. This might be even more interesting. This is going to be our tangent for sure. Signs you may not have an internal monologue. There's four. One, your thoughts come more as images, emotions, or abstract concepts, not in a verbalized way. Two, you know what you're thinking or feeling, but you don't hear it in words. Three, you experience more sensory or visual thinking, like imagining a scene rather than narrating it. And four, you find it odd when others describe talking to themselves in their heads. It may not match your experience at all.
You know, if you have anxiety, there's a good chance you've got an internal monologue because it is saying you're not doing enough or like spiraling.
Gab screaming on the mic. Mike has an internal monologue. He's the most anxious person in the world. So.
Are you?
Oh, yeah.
INFJ? Really?
Oh,
You don't
yeah.
see...
Oh, yeah.
But I have to say, for the people who don't know Mike, you do not come off as an anxious person. But I'm fascinated by this because, Mike, do you want to talk about the shirt you're wearing right now?
I will. So I'm a big fan of the Myers-Briggs personality test. My sister-in-law introduced me to it, and I thought it was the silliest thing in the world. And then I took the test just for fun, and I am an INFJ. And it is insane how every cliche about INFJs fits me to a T. So I'm wearing a shirt that says INFJ, it explains everything. And I know I'm not the only INFJ in this conversation. So Lex, you were also one, if I recall correctly.
Yep. And every meme you send me, I feel so seen. Katie, what are you?
I'm ENFJ, so I'm real close.
That
Isn't that
says
funny?
a lot. So the I is introvert, the E is extrovert.
Yeah.
I like the explanation of introvert and extrovert where introverts, to fill up our energy, might need alone time or smaller group settings. That's why I love the podcast environment. And extroverts, and correct me if I'm wrong, Katie, but if you need your energy reserves filled up, you might do that by being around more people. Mm-hmm. And then if you guys can help me out with, like, the N is intuitive.
I think so. Intuition versus sensory. And then F is feeling versus T, which is thinking. And then P or J is perception versus judgment, I think. It's always...
Which I always struggle with that word judgment.
Yeah, I don't think it means that type of judgment.
Prefers structure.
Yeah.
Judging is prefer structure, plans, and decisiveness over spontaneity. I have 3 more questions real quick. You say you're an anxious person, but I call you a thoughtful person. Do you think that in order to be thoughtful, you need an element of anxiety?
I think you do. I think that's a very good way to put it. Thank you, Katie. I feel seen because that is exactly right. My anxiety is because I think a lot. I think too much.
Well, and Katie, to your point, you are conscientious of other people. That thoughtfulness, it does make you aware of you're being thoughtful of the people around you.
F is for feeling, and that makes decisions based on values and empathy and subjective considerations. And we all have that F in ours.
Yeah.
I have a hard time when I see people that kind of walk through the world like they're the only, like the world does revolve around them and doesn't take other people into consideration. Even on a sidewalk when you see people just like willing to plow through you.
Gosh, it makes me livid. Sorry.
That's where I need the INFJ shirt. Like, yo, I'm allowed to take up space too. But go ahead, I'll move over.
Circling back, I have 2 more quick questions, and then I promise I will let you
No,
ask.
I'm enjoying this.
Okay, 2 more rapid fire. Time of day you like to write?
Night. So usually I'm the only one awake in the house when I'm doing the majority of my writing. The caveat would be if it's a weekend and I happen to be free and maybe I'm going, if there's a couple hours in the middle of the day, but if it's like a Monday through Friday, I'm writing very late into the evening usually.
Okay, so let me run this theory by you that I heard. The later into the day you get, the less inhibited you are, and your creativity is kind of like more able to flow. You're more willing to accept weird ideas as maybe okay. I don't know if it's that like your judging brain is tired at that point. Have you found any of that to be true?
That makes sense. I mean, on the rare times when I've wanted to write in the morning, it's less like, oh, I really feel like I can get stuff out better, but it's more like I just really like to sleep and I want this time to sleep. So I think that makes sense. That theory sounds sound to me. I don't have a lot of comparison because I've never been like the guy that wakes up at 5:00 in the morning to write before my day starts. Like, I need to get through the day, and then the writing is kind of my almost like relaxing because I've gotten through all the other nonsense of the day and this is the fun part. So I think that makes sense.
Do you think that if you wrote as your main job, it would be as enjoyable?
Yes. In a perfect world, I would love to do this all the time. I think it's really fun that I get to do it as kind of I don't even say side hustle. When I was in my 20s, it might have been a side hustle. Now it's just a thing I like to do that's extra. So I think I would love if I could do it more. If in a perfect world, I would have written 20 books. But the fact that I don't get to write as much as I would like because of other responsibilities and the fact that I have a 9 to 5 makes times like this exciting because I can cherish it a little bit more. So the writing process I'd probably enjoy as much, but stuff like this, conversations about it, people who actually say they read a book of mine, I mean, it's not as common because I don't get to do it as much. So that stuff is super enjoyable.
I just think it speaks so much to someone's passion and creativity that they continue to show up with other time demands in their life. And I do just think that is someone who is an artist at heart, where you're like, I love to do this, and I'm exploring and I'm growing with it, and I'm not thinking about the end product and what it can maybe produce for me. I think that would be a question for you, Mike, is when you're writing a book, how much do you think about the audience? Do you think about them? I imagine because I'm writing something for people to read, so there is maybe an inherent desire for them to be entertained. Do you want to speak on that part a bit?
That is a great question. I mean, at least from my perspective, I think if you're writing a book, you owe it to your potential readers to create the best story that you can. Obviously, we've all read books we don't like. There's books that just don't work for us. You were talking at the beginning of the episode about how, you'll see something, you'll start reading, you're like, this isn't for me, I'm going to stop. Like, there's nothing wrong with liking or not liking a book, and so you can't please everybody, but you owe it to your audience to say, I wrote something that I think is the best that it could be, that the best that I could make it for you. And if you like it, I hope you like it, but if you don't, you don't. But then you owe it to yourself to put in the work to actually get to that result. Anybody could just crank out a really poor first draft and say, I'm going to put this out. But then you didn't really put in the work because you didn't give it the time to edit, to rewrite, to make sure that the story is the best that it could be. So yeah, you're always thinking about the end audience because, especially when it comes to a book, it's an investment of people's time. I mean, my book is 220 pages or whatever, so it probably only takes a few hours to read. But, you're asking for somebody to give you several hours of their time. And so you owe it to them to really make the story the best that it could be. You hope that they like it, but it's, I think, less about producing something that they're going to love, and more you want to show respect for your readers. And I think, that's always in the back of my head when I was writing this was, if somebody doesn't like the book, they don't like the book, but I don't want somebody to read this and say, this looks lazy. This looks not professionally written, or, like somebody didn't put in the time or the respect. So I think that's what I'm thinking of when I think of the potential readers, is that I'm giving them the respect of knowing that I'm asking them to invest their time and to read this. And so I'm actually doing the best that I could in terms of the work.
I think that's phenomenal, because I think there are just different art forms that lend themselves to different modes of thinking about how much do you think about the audience. But regardless, I like your point of it being a respect element. Yeah, I could write a song and think, I wrote this song to get out something in me. I hope people like it, but if they don't, whatever. But I still should have some integrity over what I'm releasing. Or don't make the recording so difficult to hear that it's jarring. Or I'm just trying to think of how it applies to other modalities. Like with film, writing a book and writing for film, I'm sure it's quite similar, because with a movie, you have a very real audience and you're trying to put butts in seats to watch your movie in a way. So you do want to consider that. And Mike, you have also written comedy roast. Do you want to talk about that really quick? And how that's different than writing a fiction novel with just your name on it, or yeah.
Yeah, sure. So a very good friend of mine was trying to audition for a comedy roast where they were roasting the comedian and actor Jack Black. It was called the Friars Club. There was this comedy club in New York, and they had all these professional roasters who you've probably seen on Comedy Central and all those things. But they had one spot that they were giving to an amateur. It was basically saying okay, we have all these professional comedians, but we're going to let one amateur comedian, be one of the roasters. And so they opened it up to the public, and there was, I don't know, 60 or 70 comedians, including my good friend Amadeo. And he wanted to do it because it was kind of his dream to do a roast, and he asked me if I would help him write the jokes. And so it was like a contest. So they had to do a fake roast where you were just picking a random person, and then they actually had you roast a real person, and then they picked the top three, and then the top three from there and whatever. And he ended up winning the whole thing. So he was able to roast Jack Black, and I wrote his jokes for that too. And I met one of the main producers of that event. I met the producer and I said, hey, this was a lot of fun. If you ever have any other opportunities, I love to write jokes. And the producer, gave me a couple opportunities, and I was able to write for a few other roasts and events that they held too. So they did one for Robert De Niro, which was freaking amazing because I got to be in the room of all these really famous actors, and, I had to pretend to be professional and everything. Martin Scorsese, I got to write for one that honored him. But that is just a very fun type of writing because nobody knows who you are. You're trying to make comedians or actors or whoever you're writing for sound good. You're trying to write in their voice, and you're trying to say I'm going to craft jokes that I think this person could say that the audience will laugh at. It's very an instantaneous type of writing because you instantly know if what you wrote was funny or not because people are going to laugh at a joke or they won't. Whereas, you're writing a book or a movie, you might be working on it for 2 years. But, writing comedy, it's if it's working or if it's not. So it's been a few years, but it's pretty cool just to be able to say that I did that I got to write words that came out of Robert De Niro's mouth. So,
Totally.
I got that one forever. So, even if nothing else ever ends up happening, I get to say that I got to do that.
I also like that point of remembering some of the cool things that you've done as an artist. I'd like to hear from both of you on this. I know the artist struggle for me at times is you finish something and then it's well, what's the next thing? And I think it's really important that we pause and take in these moments. Like you said, words that you wrote have come out of Robert De Niro's mouth. How many people can say that? That is so cool. And Katie, you have all these things to it. You have a long list of accomplishments yourself. And I don't even want to call them accomplishments because they're so much more than they're these experiences. They're these really cool moments when I feel kind of down on myself or where I feel what am I doing with my life? I'm wondering what's next? What do I want to be doing? I have to look back and think of, oh, but look, you performed at the Byam. These are some pretty cool things. And use that to kind of fill up your cup again, if that makes sense. Katie, I'm curious if you have you're nodding your head. I'm speak. How does it affect you with your artistry and from acting to voiceover to painting?
I think it's really important to stop and reflect, and I was doing that recently because for me, if I retire at the normal retirement age, I'm exactly halfway through my career. And me personally, maybe it's the OCD in me, but like I need to memorialize it somehow for myself. So I'm going to be starting a Substack where I'm just going to talk about things I've learned, and there'll be like some wacky anecdotes in there about things I've done because it's super important to reflect. And reflect in a way that works for you. Because for me, it's not enough to just be like, yeah, I did all that and I have it in a resume and then I wrote a CV. Okay, cool. Like, no, like my work is, a lot of my work is visual. So I was an independent filmmaker for a long time. I'm still that, I'm just not actively doing a lot of that. And now I'm a painter. Everything I've ever done that I want to show is going in the Substack and I will talk about it. And then I will be like, okay, at least I did something with it.
I started a little note in my phone called Wins I'm Proud of, and I included reading Turning Corners. But I've also included, like, I completed my, like, Strong 16 challenge for that month with the bar classes I'm doing. And then there's also things of recounting music things that I did that I want to remember. But I'm trying to have a balance. It's not just like, look at this success that the world defines as success. Like, I sang on this stage. It's like, no, it's also the fact that I finished reading a book and I haven't read a book in a while and it was my friend's book. I'm proud of my friend. I would really encourage people to keep note of these things that it could just feel like a win to you. Something that like once you did it, you felt energized by. Because there's enough in life that can like weigh us down. There's a lot that we can't control in life. There's tons of stress going on in life from a micro level within our own little circle to a macro level. So I like these things, yeah.
When you're in that zone of reflecting on things, I think I need to do it in order to move forward. So I'm at the halfway point. What is the next half of my career going to look like? Because in my opinion, the first half was outrageous in some really great ways. It was very stressful. It was very exciting. And I'm like, I know that the best days are not behind me. So it's going to help me reflect and move forward. So I'm excited about that. And I can transition that to a question for Mike. Do you feel like after you finish a book that you need some time before you would even consider another one?
In this case, yeah, I needed a break. There might be another one in me, maybe another two, maybe another three. We'll see. I will say that after doing the short films, which you've both been involved in different aspects, like Gala, which you scored, Lex, like that's a 10-minute short film that took years off my life. So I mean, like doing those types of things because it's just so much stress. That's the thing where I'm like, I can't. I'm not going to do anything for a long time.
Why did that feel more stressful?
In the case of, the two short films I directed, producing, obviously you're putting up a lot of costs. There's not a lot of people who are funding short films. But you're also responsible for so many people. I mean, you produce stuff like it's like you have to answer to everything. And I'm just like, I don't know how people make feature films. Like this 10-minute short film, so much time, so much preparation. And so I just would say it's just bigger because you're not just sitting in your room writing something. Like you're on a set, you're, meeting with actors, or you're meeting with a grip who's doing something with like, it's just bigger. It's more stress. And for somebody who already has enough anxiety, it's just a different beast. And I mean, Katie, you can speak to this way better just from your experience, but producing a film, even a short film, is just mind-boggling exhausting.
Especially, well, you hit the nail on the head if you're a thoughtful person. If you're a thoughtful person and you want everybody to have a good experience, and I can tell you with certainty, Mike Smith is one of the best producers I've ever worked with. He is so thoughtful. He was like, I need to make sure I pay you for your parking. And I was like, nobody does that. That is so thoughtful of you. I don't know if you remember that from a decade ago.
I don't remember that, but
I remember.
Thank you for saying that.
I mean, I've worked with tons of producers. big projects, small projects, everything in between projects, and you're one of the most thoughtful. And that's why I remember at the end of that project, you were like, yeah, I'm probably not doing this. I don't really like producing. I was like, oh, that's because you're really good at it and you're really thoughtful. And that is absolutely exhausting.
Thank you both for speaking on that. We spoke at the beginning about how Turning Corners was not a book that you could have written in your 20s. All three of us were talking about that creative process, looking back at where we've come and that life experience before and how it influences our art. And I want to jump into Katie. You did the cover art for Turning Corners. I would love to hear from both of you what that process was like.
I just want to first say, thank you, Mike, for the opportunity to do a book cover. I am honored, and it was a really, really cool experience. Stressful, especially when I had convinced myself he hated it for a little while.
Post you sending it to me?
Yeah.
No.
He was, no, we were texting, I was like, okay, here it is, I think. Because with paintings, it's like, well, if you didn't like this part, I'm going to have to cover it up. So it's not like I can edit it all that much, though. I'm just so grateful to you for being flexible with me and letting me just go off and do it and come back and be like, here it is. I bet you didn't expect so much purple.
I mean, I'll go into, I've seen Katie's work and her design work. And so it's kind of like when, a director casts an actor, you just have a feeling of this is what I'm looking for. And so I was a big admirer of your paintings in general. And I said, I think this is I don't speak in art terms. And I think I even said that to you. I don't know what words mean when it comes to art. I couldn't describe what I wanted, but I was just I've seen what you do. And I think this is a vibe of what I'm going for with this book. So do your thing. And I'm trusting that you're going to meet the assignment. And you definitely did. You did. It was amazing. I mean, the cover is amazing. Everybody that has read this book or seen this book, everybody has complimented the cover. And I'll say one more thing is Katie didn't just do it blindly. She read the entire book first because she wanted to see what the text was about. And she actually put a lot of thought in, making sure that the cover had meaning behind the visuals, and that I think that somebody who reads the book has a better understanding of what the cover is conveying, because beyond just being really eye-poppingly visual, it has a lot of meaning that you wouldn't know if you just looked at it. So, which was scary for me because that was still in early drafts, and I remember I kept saying, it's going to get better. You're reading the shitty part first, but I promise it'll get better as I go.
Oh my gosh, no, even the drafts, everything I read was amazing from even the non-final draft. But I don't know, I think it's a little bit surreal. I mean, I look at this and this is absolutely not a traditional book cover at all. So I just appreciate that you were willing to do something that is different, period. And I think that it is a book that I would gravitate toward in the store. I was hoping it was something that somebody would want to walk over to in a bookstore and pick it up, or see online and go, I need to click into that more. What is that? That was one of my goals.
It's modern and it's fresh. To me, it's also intriguing because it's not like a graphic design piece. You can see your brush strokes. And correct me if I'm wrong, but is that the painting that Mike is picking up today?
Yeah, it's a 4 foot wide by 2 foot high painting on canvas. And then we took that into the computer. My husband, Blake, he did all of the layout. So he picked the font and he figured out all the drop shadows and the back layout. The write-up that I have, I'll just read it. The cover art for Turning Corners is a layered design mirroring the interplay of thought, choice, and consequence. Layer 1. The foundation of the design features abstract textures symbolizing the inner thought life of the characters. These textures represent the chaotic and complex inner workings of the mind where decisions are born. And then layer 2. Layer 2 is a thin netting pattern overlays the textured foundation representing the metaphorical net that the characters have laid for themselves. This delicate, almost imperceptible layer symbolizes the invisible barriers and burdens that resonate with many of us, reminding us how our decisions shape our lives. And the one thing that I didn't even put into the write-up because it's going to be hard to tell is, so there's 4 main characters and there's 4 different shades of that netting, but that's not something anybody. Mike didn't even know that.
I did not know that.
Because there's just tiny stuff like that. I'm like, well, who really cares? But and then layer 3, the final layer depicts the tragic consequences of those thoughts and choices. This is rendered through abstract blood splatters in multiple colors, representing the lives intertwined in the fatality. These splatters lie at the scene of the accident, the apartment building's corner, an unmistakable nod to the book's title, Turning Corners. Oh, thank you.
That's really cool.
I will say I did send just to a couple really close friends because I didn't want to blow up your spot. But like I sent that to a couple people and I was just like, check this out. And people who read the book before it came out. And it was like, oh my God. Like once you actually, like again, it looks great. I think everybody's going to, when they see this, it's like, yeah, it's a great cover. But seeing how much thought was put into not only the layers, but the meaning behind it just brings to life how much effort and thought was put into this, and it's amazing. So
The theme of the podcast is thoughtfulness.
yeah.
What happens when thoughtful artists make art and when they collaborate, which also you guys collaborated on the audiobook portion of it. Mike, Katie, do you want to talk about that part?
I would be happy to start. So first of all, I did do an audiobook of Miss Mezzanine, and let's not forget that Lex narrated the title character, Miss Mezzanine, with myself because there was 2 points of view. But with this book, you know, I don't know about you guys. I love listening to audiobooks. I think if you have a good narrator, it can bring interpretation to life that even as the writer you didn't know or have. I had audio books for even the shorter ones that I did, and I worked with really talented people on those too. But for this book, I really, really, really was set on having an audiobook for it, and I wanted to produce it myself. And I actually remember before I even had the first draft written, I reached out to Katie and I said, I would love for you to narrate this book that I'm going to be writing. I've worked with her from an acting perspective. I knew what poise you would bring to the character and great interpretation and emotion. So you were the first person who I wanted to work with. I wanted to narrate myself too. So I narrated one of the characters. Amadeo, who we mentioned earlier in the podcast, was one of the narrators. And then I hired a 4th narrator. Her name is Dana Kreitz, who narrated the 4th character, who was also fantastic. Everybody recorded from different places. Katie and I were obviously in Pittsburgh. Amadeo recorded from Los Angeles. Dana is based in New York City. But it was just a wonderful experience because, Katie, I would love to hear how you felt about it. But from my standpoint, it's like hearing 4 different people bring to life 4 different characters because, you know, the book's written from different points of view. It's just by far my favorite part of the project was bringing the audiobook to life. So I really hope people that enjoy audiobooks give this one a listen because I think everybody did a wonderful job. So, Katie, I don't know what your experience was like. Hopefully as good as I am hyping it up to be.
Oh my gosh. Well, I just think that the idea to have 4 different people read it is so fresh and exciting. I'm sitting upstairs in the room where I record voiceover, and I'm trying to do this script, and I'm sending him some samples, and I'm like, oh no, like this is going to take me forever. And the problem was I was trying to self-direct. And I could have argued this sentence should be said one of 3 ways, and then maybe you thought of a 4th way. And so I just was like, after a while, Mike, was there any chance, what if we went to your guy's house and your audio guy's house and we did this together and you can direct me and then I'll just know then and there because I'm happy to do it however you want it. This is your vision. But I found trying to self-direct this type of thing was very difficult. Hopefully you were happy with that.
No,
product.
it was one. Your performance was great. Everybody who's listened to it was very complimentary. It was actually fun being in the room. I hope I didn't over direct because it's a weird role to be in because I wrote the book. I wanted to kind of let you do your own thing, but then there was also times where I'm like, I think that this is ultimately what I'm going for. You don't want to be the guy that gives a line reading, but it's a couple times I'm like, well, you don't know what she said in the last chapter because I narrated that part, but it's important for the reader, for the listener to hear this. So I hope I wasn't overbearing, but
Oh,
it was a lot of fun.
you couldn't have been farther from it. I could have taken any amount more of direction that you wanted to give. Tell me how you like it, because personal interpretation is just vast.
That's why I love audiobooks because again, like you get to just hear somebody bring something that you're like, oh, I never would have thought of it that way. Everybody should go and listen to it and listen to Katie's wonderful narration. Although you got to wait a while because she's not in it for a little bit.
Where can people get your book and your audiobook?
So Amazon, my book's available on Amazon. It's available in hardcover, paperback, Kindle, and the audio is on audible.com. You can get it through Amazon, the audio. And I believe the audio is also available on iTunes too. So if people listen to their audio directly through their Apple account, it's available for sale there as well.
I'm glad you guys talked about that, because you can say a sentence in so many different ways. And it is making me think about just how, because of both of your thoughtfulness, how that lends itself to your creativity. You know, as much as we talked about in this conversation, the need for discipline and just sitting down and writing, or just sitting down and drawing or painting or writing a song, there's still an element of imagination. Because I can tell you right now, if I took a long drive in silence, I don't think I would have come up with Turning Corners. There's that balance, right? Like, totally need that discipline aspect of sitting down, and you've got a beautiful brain. Something I think is really cool about writers or artists in general is this idea, like, you are creating something out of nothing. Katie, you created a painting out of a blank canvas. Mike, you created a book out of a blank page. I'm just like, shout out to all the artists, because your brain created these characters.
Something I say to some of my friends, and only when I mean it, and I'm going to say it to you, Mike, is thank you for creating art. We need what your brain has. We need your art in the world. We need you to keep making this world a better place through your art. So thank you, like, truly, for writing this book and for giving me crazy opportunities to join you in that. Thank you.
Thank you.
You are also a dad. As a parent, is there something that you would like to instill in your little one in terms of artistry, imagination, and how do you or would you encourage that with your little buddy?
So I really appreciate that question. And I will say that and I think I say this in the back of the book and like the acknowledgments or author's note, one of the coolest things was my son sitting next to me on the couch when I would write sometimes. And he'd ask questions and he was interested in the story. So we make it a point, my wife or I read to him every single night. We've been doing that for years. He loves stories. I'm hoping he continues that love for stories, not necessarily, writing, but which would be cool too. But he just loves reading because it's just a wonderful thing you can do as a child. But I will say, shout out. So my son just finished first grade, and on the very last day of school, his teacher gave, like superlatives, like most likely to this, most likely to that. And his was, he got 2, class clown, which he's a character if you've met him. But the other was future author. So as a dad, I've just melted when I saw that. But yeah, I mean, he's very interested. He asked me so many questions about Turning Corners. It was fascinating. So I'm hoping he really enjoys reading because, again, like you said, and how we started the discussion, like it's all about the audience and young kids, especially. I mean, they have the best imaginations of all of us. So I just read to him The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which was one of my favorite books as a kid, and he loved it. So I love hearing and seeing him enjoy books. Nothing better.
Very cool. For anyone who's listening that's like, man, I do want a good read. Turning Corners is a great one to read if you've been reading for years or if you're trying to get back into reading fiction. We like to ask one last question of all the guests on the podcast. If you could know how or when you would die, would you want to know?
I would not.
And why?
Because I want to live every day of my life blissfully unaware of what's coming next.
I just think the response is interesting as a writer who you write out these characters, a portion of their beginning to their end. When you're writing, a story like this, do you know the end? Like, we are asking, like, would you want to know your how or why end when you're writing? Do you know the ultimate end, or when do you know that?
So that's a great question. It probably has varied based on projects. In the case of Turning Corners, I knew exactly how the story was going to end, including the very last line of the book. It's the journey that got there that, you uncover so much, like, oh, I never would have thought that this character would have been as important, or I never would have thought that this could have been a good way to connect A to B. So that stuff was all, I didn't know all that stuff necessarily at the start, but the conclusion of where Turning Corners ended, I had a pretty solid idea where I wanted to go. And for the most part, including the very last line, it was exactly where I thought.
Oh, I like that, because in a way, we know our ultimate end. Even something you said, you didn't know this character would be as important as they were or play the role that they were. I was like, let's just leave the listeners on that to sink in.
I like it.
Thanks for visiting.
Thank you so much for having me. This was an absolute blast.